delighted to welcome Anthony Cronin to the You and Your Business studio. Hi, Anthony.
Hi, Alec. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no, fantastic. And I must say to our listeners, Anthony has been one of those unfortunates who's experienced COVID up front and personal. So I'm delighted that you're on the road to recovery.
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay. Listen, as I do with all my guests, I take them back to their last year in school and where are they heading? Are they traveling people? Are they academics? Or are they just looking to put a few bob in their pocket? What were you thinking of when you were in your last year of school? And what was your plan?
Funnily enough, Alec, I was actually thinking of becoming a school teacher.
Oh, right.
And I went off to UCC and did the first year in arts. And I think after 1 year of looking into it, I said I might go off to Australia and have another think about it. And those few months in Australia turned into a few years, and I ended up doing a course in finance out there while I was there. So yeah, from school teacher to finance, ending up in payroll.
Okay, just tell me what tempted you towards Australia?
I had my cousin was out there at the time, and I suppose I went out and I stayed with her for a few months, and then I've just made a lot of friends and decided, well, I thought it was great, but as you know, everybody gets homesick because we love home, and I don't think I could have stayed there long term. So after the few years were up and the college was done, I came away home straight away, pretty much.
And what attracted you in college to the particular course that you took?
I think I did that course because I suppose I had a couple of friends that were doing it. It was local to where I was staying. And look, to be honest with you, finance had been something that was either the arts or finance was what I was looking at in UCC at the time. So having tried the arts, I said, let's have a go with the other one. And I suppose it worked out well in the end because it's kind of the area that I've ended up in.
It's amazing because so many people hate finance to that sort of level, but obviously you had a grow for it.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far now, but when I suppose when I got back, then summer again the same kind of thing as Australia. My dad got me helped me get a summer job in the HSE payroll, right. Sending out P45s.
Oh, right.
And a summer job turned into another few years somewhere. So and I suppose I've been in payroll ever since. But those few years, turned into. I went and did another bit of traveling after 3 years. Came back to find a hiring freeze. So in the HSE, I think that was in the 90s. They're not bringing people back. So I just went, okay, I'll for that year, I went to work for a company I'd never heard of called ADP, a payroll provider. And it turned out that they were the biggest one in the world and that they paid nearly over a quarter of the US workforce. And I just learned so much from them that it was unbelievable working with those guys,
Yeah, I mean, people don't tend to think of it on scale. I mean, for most companies, it's sort of just a function that people get paid and they make it happen. If I just take you back to the HSE experience, obviously there's a lot of employees there. What sort of challenges did you see facing people there and also from your own side of it?
Yeah, so I suppose from our side of it, I suppose there's, as you know, like it's a government organization, so systems and processes might not be, cutting edge and things like that. But the teams were fantastic there, and it really gave me I've always worked since then as part of teams and things, and there's always a good team spirit and things like that within the teams within the HSE. From the employee side there, I think I was there during the nursing strike over pay and things like that. So like having to go to hospitals on a day and explain that pay cuts were coming and things like that was not ideal, especially when my sister is a nurse. But so yeah, it was a challenging time, I think, to be in a payroll department. And I suppose the one thing about payroll is it really is, and this might be just my opinion, and one of the things that makes the world go round, because no matter what profession is doing anything, they don't. So you're very reliant on payroll in that sense, and it's a very often a forgotten function in a company because you only hear about it when something goes wrong.
Yes, no, I know that. What you said there then fascinated me. This company ADP paying more than a quarter of the Americans. That must be a fascinating business because there's obviously economy of scale and all sorts of things. What are the dynamics of that?
Yeah, so I suppose one of the major differences I saw straight away was the use of technology and like the processes that they had in place to enable us to really pay thousands of people rather than hundreds. And I really took that, like it's just phenomenal. And one of the most interesting things actually that I found was that, and this will be on the revenue generation side of things, is that payroll processing itself doesn't actually make the money for these companies. It's more about the funding side of things, how long the money sits in your account. So you can literally, if you're talking 25% of the American workforce and they're funding to you to pay their people, that money is sitting in accounts for, up to
Yes.
weeks. In some cases, that money then can be utilized in investments and things like that. So that's where the actual revenue generation is from. The payroll production is just a way to get the money into the account, So that was always what I found the most interesting.
Is that dynamic changed more recently in terms of with sort of negative interest rates on large amounts of deposits? I mean, that's more in Europe. I don't know what's happening in the States.
Yeah, what I would say is that rather than the interest itself, the monies that come in are more used in a way of really short-term investments, things like that,
Right.
to generate income in like really kind of low risk areas. And I suppose there's a lot of laws around that. But when companies are of that size, that's kind of what the end goal is, to become, for all intents and purposes, a bank, and
Yes.
and the bank is then paying out the wages as and when they're due. So, and that's kind of, yeah.
In terms of technology, how far ahead were they of everybody else? And I presume that they're keeping up to date with all of this too.
Yeah, I would say, like, I moved on to another company since then, but ADP at that time anyway, when I was there, were definitely 5 or 10 years ahead of anything I'd seen. Now, I know since then everything is with the web and the portals and things that are available now. Everybody seems to have caught up and there's more of an even playing field, but definitely back in those days, they would have been streets ahead of anybody I had seen at that time. Like I moved on to more global payroll companies then, including Safeguard World, who are fantastic. Like I had never experienced like teamwork and customer service like I did there. And I suppose learning the tech side from an ADP, who are like, let's say, the McDonald's in the
Right.
payroll world. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I
Oh,
mean,
no,
you,
no,
you know
no. I
what
know
you're
what you mean.
getting,
Yeah. Mm.
and you know why you're paying that, and that's, it's great service too. But then you move up to like a Safeguard, who are literally holding your hand, and I suppose they would be more like, more of a limousine service for global payroll. So you're seeing that side of it then, and then putting those two together, I suppose, was really, I moved on to other providers after that, and you can really see these two giants in the industry and what they do differently, but what they could do, maybe in similar scenarios as well, that you can take to other places and maybe bring things with you.
It's amazing how, I mean, if we just take the journey so far from school to starting something you weren't particularly then keen on, to something else that's now taken you on this journey. Now you're working for global payroll companies, but that's not the end of the journey. You were to progress even further. Tell us more about
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I moved on then to Ernest & Young for a period. Just at that time, I was coming up with flexiwage. To be honest, my main role was move, and I suppose it still exists in a big way because we're doing it in Ireland now. Was moving kind of people from paying their staff weekly to paying their staff monthly. And I suppose that's been going on since the 80s and 90s, when before that everybody was weekly. But I suppose the cost was the main issue. Most of the big companies now pay monthly. And I suppose when I was doing it, one of the things I did see and notice was the attrition level of staff when they move, especially in the lower paid sector. So imagine your Tesco or your guys in one of the retail stores that are being paid weekly, and then all of a sudden it's moved to monthly. You're on a low wage. You're having to manage this money across the month. And that's where, like, we all know, and I definitely would be a victim of this myself. Definitely in my younger days, that in the third week of the month, I'm at home. I'm not, you're not out. You're not out with the lads. The lads that are getting paid weekly are out every Friday. And that was and that was always a thing for me when I was doing it. And that's kind of where flexiwage itself came from, I suppose, was that those experiences and seeing it through the eyes of both the employer trying to save the money. And that's clearly all it is. They're not trying to make life harder for their staff. But when you're paying €4 or €5 or whatever it is to produce a payslip once a week,
Yeah.
and you can do it once a month legally. Why wouldn't you? You know, so I suppose that was the next part of the journey. You know.
It's interesting. I can I can resonate with your thoughts around weekly versus monthly there. And so, I mean, really, this was a cost saving on behalf of the employer. But are there any stats around the employee attrition rate that you might have come
Yeah,
across?
so like there's so many. It's unbelievable. Like like I suppose the bigger stats are around the borrowing and things that people tend to do because of it. Like I know we have a lot of credit card debt now, and everybody like in certain demographics tend to go into their overdraft and out of their overdraft. But like the attrition rates were up to 10% when we were doing these transitions, depending on the type of store. So like if you're like say your retail, if you're moving from weekly to monthly and you can go down the road and have exactly the same job on a weekly pay versus on a monthly pay, then you're going to take the weekly when it helps you to survive better and to manage your money. I suppose the bigger ones were mainly in the UK. What we found when we were market researching the product was that 1 in 4, and this is massive statistics, 1 in 4 18 to 35-year-olds had used a payday loan in the last 12 months.
Wow.
I mean, that in itself is just phenomenal, that one of your employees, when you're paying monthly, was using a payday loan every month. And once you get into that cycle is the thing, you borrow the money at the end of the month, then you get paid, then you pay it back. And then by the second and third week of the month, because you've paid back that loan, you don't have enough for the month. So who are you going back to again? And it's this cycle of debt that it's very hard to get out of. It's, I suppose, the biggest thing we'd see it like in Ireland, because it's not as prevalent, is our overdraft. And I was definitely a victim of this as well myself, that I would go right down to the end of my overdraft. My pay would come in, bring me a few €100 out of it. And then by the time all my bills have come out, I'm living in my overdraft every month. And that is what we were trying to solve with this product, you know?
Yeah, no, I can certainly see what you're going there. And particularly, I mean, when you take the sort of extortionate interest rates that some of these sort of payday loan type companies, are offering, but people don't see it in real terms. They just see they're paying an extra 10 or 20 quid or something.
Oh, but it's massive. Yeah, I suppose. And even overdrafts are quite a lot when you're talking about 5, 10, 15 euros a month. It's a lot of money when you break it down into interest rates, So I suppose just on that, like that is where flexiwage came from. And just, I suppose, to give a brief kind of what we do is that flexiwage is an employee app that's offered as a benefit. It doesn't impact payroll, and the employee actually gets to determine their own pay schedule. So let's say, Alec, it suited you better to be paid weekly or fortnightly. Your employer can still go process monthly, and you get to decide yourself how you would like to receive that money.
Wow, that's a fascinating thing. So does it have any impact on the employer's cash flow?
So it actually has a positive impact, because how it works is that, let's say on the 25th of the month, prior to your end of the month pay date, the employees are told how much they've earned in the month, and they then get to decide how that's distributed. So if they have all their bills on the first of the month, they could take, like, I don't know, 70% of that on the first available pay date. So we make every Friday payday basically, and they can, take 70%, cover their bills, and then spread the other 30% over the next 3 Fridays until the next pay date, making sure that they don't actually have, they always have something coming every week. And with the employer, we don't take the funds, and this is one of our most asked questions: where do the funds go? So what they do is they actually go into an employer account where they're held, and dependent on the size of the company and their restrictions, they can actually utilize that additional cash flow once it's in place 2 days prior to every pay date. And flexiwage determines that, sends them the reports to show that, and actually facilitates the payments out of their account for them.
So it's something like an escrow type account, is it?
Exactly. Well, it can be, depending on the country, and Ireland is one of the ones where you can utilize the cash flow. The company can actually utilize the payroll funds, or they can, use them for additional employee benefits, or however they choose.
It's amazing the journey that, as I said, you've taken there. But I was fascinated that, and again, it's always about timing. That the tech summit a couple of years ago arrived here, and you were telling me a story about that. Would you like to share that with our listeners?
Yeah, I suppose where this idea came around in 2016. It's been a long time in development, I think, since then. But we got a very lucky break in Dublin. The Dublin Tech Summit started in 2017 when the Web Summit left. So they decided to hold the Startup 100 in Dublin that year. And we decided that for a bit of a punt and to see how the market would react, we got a stall at the summit, and we entered the competition, the Startup 100, and yeah, definitely wasn't expecting to win it, but we were judges from Facebook, Google, and places like that, and we went away, and little old flexiwage beat a lot of big American and other Australian companies were in the final, and we won it. So kind of quit the job the next day, as you do, in a rush. I went back the day after, I think, for a while, but yeah, it really gave us a springboard, got us in front of Enterprise Ireland, and those guys really got involved from then. We as I said, we went on from this tech summit. We've gone on to New Frontiers to get a bit of development. We then got some private funding to help us along. And Enterprise Ireland have been fantastic from day one with the Waterford Local Enterprise Office and the Young Entrepreneur of the Year. I won that in 2016, 17 and 18 for the idea and the thing down in Waterford. And they really helped us, and they brought us into the Enterprise Ireland network. And from there, they're so supportive. I don't think, I know we couldn't have done it without them. And like Brian Sheridan, our development agent is fantastic. You have your back and forth with people, but that may not agree that you can dominate the world immediately, which we obviously couldn't. But yeah, it's been fantastic. From there, we took in investment through a couple of the BICs, again, the business innovation centres around Ireland, fantastic teams to work with, and the HBSU program. We've been on it. We went on to it last year. We went to market in 2019, and we were again very lucky. At that point that we secured a number of bigger name clients, and last year we actually went live across all the Woody stores in Ireland, right. And they would be our biggest clients, and we love working with them, and we're working on rollout of other areas of their business now as well. But I suppose when you think about it from that perspective, it's and to use Woody's as an example, is that their employees, let's say, it would be monthly paid. It's difficult, part-time, different shifts, different hours, but to give them the opportunity to have their own way without impacting on payroll at all. So payroll still gets to process monthly. They just literally, there's an extra 5 minutes where their file is fed across to flexiwage every month, and the employees within their own app decide if they want to be weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. And if they want to change it back next month, again, no impact to payroll, they just change it back. And that's the simplicity of it. Like within that, we added, because of it's financial well-being. So it's not just selecting your wages within the application. We also have a budgeting tool for the employees so that they can actually see how best they should schedule their money. Right. And we have a financial habit tracker to help them change maybe unhealthy financial habits. So if I'm spending €10 a day on cigarettes and I want to try and change that habit, or I'm spending 10 on lunch, I can put in my goal and I can track that goal throughout the month, how well I've done. And then I get a report back to say, maybe you could have done this better. We teamed up with the Money Advice Service in the UK, and once a week, an additional piece of financial well-being advice goes into the app for the employees. So it's kind of growing all the time. And it's really all built around trying to keep people away from short-term borrowing and away from credit,
I mean, it's fantastic. And also the business seems to have propelled itself very, very quickly into a world. So you were pushing against an open door, obviously.
I suppose there was nothing like it. It was the best thing, I suppose. The closest thing to it is a payday advance. And that's the one thing we don't want, because as I said, you take a payday advance, you pay it back at the end of the month, and you're back in the same situation. You're borrowing again the next month. So while we kind of created a market for all intents and purposes, the most difficult part is the ones that, I suppose, while it saves money for the employer, it may not save money for the payroll provider, because they're actually losing money. So to get to work with those guys would be great, but how can you do that when it would cost you? You'd be cutting off your own nose. So we work directly with the employers, and we actually add on to any payroll system. We made it so that you don't have to have your provider involved. It's literally your employees and the employer only. So yeah.
So in other words, access to this system is available to any size of company?
Any company, we have companies from 5, I think, is our lowest headcount, and up to 3,000 is our highest at the moment.
Right.
And like, I suppose the key to it is there's no real implementation. It sits on top. So basically all that happens is a file, the last file with the employee details, and that comes across to us once a month into the system, fed in, and the employer receives a ping to say, this is how much you've earned. How would you like to receive it? And the employee has access to this app throughout the month to be managing their finances. We actually I just thought of the newest thing we added was money coaching. So we have a team now of money coaches available as well for request when an employee is in a situation. So they can request that they have a consultation with one of our money coaches, Gina or James, and they will then set up via the company to assist these employees, whether it's pension, whether it's somebody having a debt problem, or they're getting a mortgage. It can all be done through the flexiwage app, you know.
Oh, wow. Sounds fantastic. And certainly from a well-being for the employee, it sounds like a no-brainer.
There's that. Thanks very much. And what we tried to do as well, I suppose, and this is definitely led by myself and Lindsay's influence, Lindsay's our chairman, is that we tried to make it accessible so that companies of all sizes could access it. So, and I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here, but like what we were trying to be is keep the costs down. So like, because people are always kind of balk when we tell them how much it costs. It's between €1 and €2 is all it costs per employee per month. And we kind of, how we can run it for that, it's really around trying to make sure that the financial well-being side isn't overshadowed by it being too costly to implement or to give to the employees, you know.
Taking yourself as an individual, coming up with a concept like this and taking it from where you took an early stage to propelling it into a marketplace, what were the particular challenges you had around that?
I suppose the biggest challenge at the beginning, because I'm not a tech person, you know, I'm the payroll guy, was building the team to around me. I suppose we've gotten to a stage now where we're a real tight-knit group where we're good. We're all friends, and even the people that have come into the business, we've all become very good friends. Building the team and knowing when to ask for help at the beginning. I suppose coming from a kind of payroll background and knowing so much in that area, I really didn't understand how much it took to run a business and how much help you do need. So definitely step one for me, if I could go back in time, would be to get on board with Enterprise Ireland a lot earlier. I suppose we had 2 years there where we were humming and hawing about different things. And the other thing that we learned, and this is probably the best piece of advice, is to get the IP sorted, the intellectual property, as early as possible. Now, we were very lucky that this didn't exist, and we have actually just secured since December a patent on this for the next 12 years. So, but I suppose if we hadn't done it, there have been challenges already to the patent, and other people were coming up with this, maybe because they had seen us, or maybe because somebody else had come up with it at the same time. But luckily, we were the first. So it's that would definitely be a piece of advice to anybody, especially in the tech area. Try and get yourself the IP protected as soon as possible.
Yes, no, it sounds fascinating. Tell me about building the team around the technology piece. I mean, where did you start to even find people that you could work with?
Well, we started with, there's been a few different teams involved now. What we started, myself, I got John and Jerry, but then we moved on to different developers. Now we ended up, a good friend of mine, Chris, is in the end, he is a developer. He was with somebody else, and he decided, yes, I'll jump and have a go. And Chris is with us for years, you know, and owns part of the company. I suppose that is the way at the beginning with a startup, that you get people in, you kind of offer them equity and things like that. And I suppose we work now with, we have 2 internal people, and then we have an outsourced team as well. So we have an outsourced team, UK based, UK and India actually based, that kind of do a lot of the back end stuff. And the like the day-to-day kind of stuff then is done in-house by Helen and Chris.
Shows you the power of networking, how you can link into people. I think it's often overlooked.
Definitely. Oh, definitely, I suppose. And I actually met Chris years and years ago, but it was on an Enterprise Ireland thing. So it was on that Young Entrepreneur of the Year thing. They himself and his brother had one app in it, and flexiwage was in it too. And we were literally, they came in late one morning and got stuck sitting next to the oldest guy in the room, who was me. So, and we've been friends ever since. So it was great that he came on board, you know.
And I suppose talk about the challenge of COVID. Has that impeded your development at all?
Massively, I suppose. We were sitting in Boston in March when this all kicked off. We were over there. We just secured our investment. Actually, was mostly from the US. We were starting to pilot, and we had to come home, and we haven't been back since.
Wow.
So it's a year and a half, and what we like all the plans, a lot of the things we had, I suppose, all HR departments ground to a halt, and we're dealing so much with COVID related issues and how to get people back to work, how to get people into the workplace, that we actually did a kind of a freeze on charging and stuff like that for 6 months or for however last year. So we didn't want to lose anybody. And we wanted to help the employees of the clients we have as much as we could. So yes, definitely. It's starting to come back now, I have to say. We've implemented 2 in the last 2 months, and we have another 50 stores going live for another client in a couple of months' time. So it's definitely making a comeback the last three or 4 months. But the 12 months before that, I suppose everybody was in the same boat. Everything is shut. How do you contact and sell, or how do you show how you can help when the doors aren't open? So it was difficult, and but we're getting through it.
I suppose it's a look at the resilience of the company. You're getting an early test on it.
Definitely, I suppose. Enterprise Ireland have been brilliant again. I have to hand it to Brian there. Like any support you need and things like that. We're lucky. I suppose we're lucky in one sense that we secured our investment prior to COVID, because I'll be honest, I would say it would have been a lot harder to get and to do the fundraising and stuff if we hadn't done it already. So definitely challenging, but as you said, it showed that we were no longer kind of in that startup phase, no longer piloting, and even a pandemic couldn't stop us.
Well, that could be your tagline: even a pandemic cannot stop us. I certainly appreciate what you're saying about Enterprise Ireland, and this is about having the expertise and skill to raise money for a company like that.
Yeah, definitely. I suppose they were very supportive. Now as I said, we got very lucky with investors. We've taken it in privately all the way. We haven't gone with any syndicates or anything like that. It's kind of been word of mouth a little bit. Things like meeting somebody at the chamber, networking. Brought in one of the investors. Another investor was local to us, who brought me to America to meet people, and all Irish American businessmen really is what we've ended up with, and great guys to work with. Get to go out to Boston the odd time, and see how Irish it is out there. Hopefully again soon. But yeah, it's difficult, and we're not finished doing it. Sadly, it's a job in itself. I'll be honest, to raise the funding, but it does make the difference.
And it just shows you the power of networking internationally with our people.
100%. And I have to say, out in Boston, it's like being in Ireland in some of the places, and they're as Irish as any of us, really, to be fair.
I suppose, just with a minute left, you might tell us what next for flexiwage.
Yeah, I suppose, as I said, we kind of had to scale back the international expansion. We plan to continue to do that. Just for the next 6 months, we'll be working more with our Irish clients and then building up more Irish clients. And then the plan is, we've already piloted in the UK and in the US. So hopefully 2022 we'll be rolling out in the UK and the US.
Wow. Well, that's a positive message.
Sorry, I forgot to mention, we're just starting the new chip accelerator in Texas in July. So that was our American plan. There's no postponing it, and it's a big deal. We're one of the first Irish companies to get on it. So they get to America ready. So hopefully by December we'll be all guns blazing out in Texas.
Now, flexiwage, watch this space.